Let's be perfectly honest about something. Depending upon where you live in this country, people have basically two ways of reacting to the coronavirus. Some run around in total fear and almost to an obsession trying to avoid contact with the virus, and others just take life as it comes along.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
And welcome to the Tuesday edition of our program. Our guest today, somebody you've heard a number of times in the program, the Reverend Dr. Timothy Gahles, 9/11 survivor, and also very well studied in areas of our life and human behavior. And I want to start the program with a question, just go right into it. When we look at how we've responded in the United States, Timothy, have we gone over the top sometimes?
Well, absolutely. People are taking it too far. We're even seeing the neighbor snitch on the neighbor for things that are not breaking the law. They're not breaking the law, but because of fear, which FEAR, forget everything and run, seems to be the modus operandi in people's minds now. Forget everything logical, true, real, and lawful, but because of the fear of a pandemic, let's start ratting people out for the crazy stuff that is that we shouldn't be.
Absolutely.
Somebody standing more than 12 feet from me, I need to call the cops. They don't have a mask on, or it's just under their nose. Oh my gosh, we're all going to die. How could they? They must hate humanity.
I know.
This is where we've come now. And the question is there truly, and I'd like to say this, is there a fine line between pandemic and insanity?
I'm beginning to wonder. I've seen too many stories, too many examples of stupidity. If you go back last week, not that many days ago, there was a story that came out of Hocking County, Ohio, city of Logan. Nice small area. And let me kind of tell you what the area is like. It is basically conservative, basically quiet, basically low crime, it's either both farming and some industrial nearby. In other words, it's your Norman Rockwell kind of community, if you can imagine what I mean by Norman Rockwell community. And there was a football game. I can't remember, was it middle school? I think it was middle school. May have been high school, doesn't matter. And a handful of parents are there to watch their kids play. Now, let's be clear, and I double-checked this right before the broadcast. In the city of Logan, Ohio, there are no ordinances passed by the city council regarding, coronavirus face mask coverings or any of that stuff. Either is there in Hocking County. There is a state mandate from the governor's office that talks about recommending the use of face masks when practical and when social distancing is impractical, especially indoors. And it has plenty of exemptions for health reasons. And if people have certain health conditions, they are not required to wear one. Now remember, the theory is that a mask is supposed to protect you protect other people from you. Now, that is yet to be proven enough to me with all the studies that are out there. There's 25 years worth of studies that dispute that idea. Fauci himself, back in March, April, was saying a mask is foolishness. They don't work. They don't help you. It may stop a droplet or two, were his exact words. As a matter of fact, would you like me to remind you of what Mr. Dr. Fauci said back in March, April?
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
You're sure of it? Because people are listening really closely to this.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is. And often, there are unintended consequences. People keep fiddling with the mask, and they keep touching their face.
And can you get some schmutz sort of staying inside there?
Of course. But when you think masks, you should think of healthcare providers needing them and people who are ill.
So we see that Dr. Fauci thoroughly agreed that the idea of wearing a face covering to protect yourself in particular, because it's of no value, even the box of a good quality one. I mean, the real deal, not the fake garbage coming out of China. You know, the stuff you find at Walmart for $1.29 for 2 masks in a little bag. Those things, right on the label, will not protect you from a virus. Period. End of discussion. Even the medically certified ones. And what people don't understand, and any doctor will tell you, and I know you've been doing your reading too, that if you don't know how to wear one, you're not doing it right. You're doing more harm than good. And something else people don't realize, especially when you wear them for any length of time, like in an operating room. Do you know that they raise the oxygen level in an operating room? Did you know that?
No, but that makes sense.
It does. Having a wife that worked in an OR, she remembers one time surgery starting and the doctor was yawning, going, "Did anyone turn the oxygen on?" Oh, they forgot they had to turn it on, because when you're wearing a face mask, you're accumulating CO2 in your bloodstream if you don't have enough oxygen going in at the same time. So you have to change the concentration in an OR to begin with. You don't just do it with the way this is not the MASH unit in 1952 we saw on TV and the movies. I mean, we have come a long way from there. And you really can't, look, I'm at an age where if I go into a store, and I've been kind in a few places to wear one, I can only be in the store about 7 or 8 minutes, and I start getting woozy. I begin to get that buildup of CO2. I mean, I'm at that age. It's going to be a problem. And the coverings that I use that are trying to be, quote, better, probably I just want to wear, some stupid bandana and be done with it if I'm going to do that. And then I got to wait in the car about 10 or 15 minutes before it's safe for me to drive till I can get my O2 level back and sustained. Now, I don't have any lung issue. It's just, it comes with being my age. It is a problem. And so here you have this officer doing what he did. So let's hear the news report, and then we'll come back. And I thought this was fascinating. And once again, I want to explain something, too. The reporter that did this story is obviously a newbie because he doesn't even know how to ask the right kind of questions. He's taking everything verbatim as somebody said it or somebody spun it. That's the best way to put it. It was spun. And he just read the spin and ran with it. And, TV is all about keep Corona alive. So here's a news story that came out of Ohio, and then we'll talk about it in just a moment.
Wednesday night, school resource officer Chris Smith was at a middle school football game in Logan, Ohio, enforcing guidelines set by state officials for sporting events and a mask requirement set by school officials. Police say he spotted a woman later identified as Alicia Kitts in the stands not wearing a mask. He asked Kitts to wear a mask, but she refused, saying she had asthma. Police say Smith then told her she would have to wear a mask or leave the stadium. After telling her multiple times she needed to leave the stadium, police say Smith told her if she didn't leave, she would be cited for trespassing. After more non-compliance, Smith began to arrest Kitts, but she resisted.
This is over a mask.
Smith told Kitts if she didn't comply, he would tase her. And after even more non-compliance, that's exactly what happened. Kitts was then taken to the parking lot and cited for criminal trespassing. She was then released. More charges are pending against Kitts and the woman who allegedly interfered with her arrest. Logan police say they want one thing to be clear about this incident. Kitts was not arrested because she refused to wear a mask. She was arrested because she refused to leave school property after being asked to do so multiple times after failing to comply with school policy. Zach Shrivers, WTAP News.
Okay, there you have it. Now, the first thing that comes to mind is the reporter is using the term, she was arrested for trespassing. Trespassing, not for not wearing a mask.
There.
What was that?
Well, everybody was there with her. Why weren't they arrested for it, too?
Mm-hmm. And they're thinking about maybe charging the gal that tried to help her. But, it was ridiculous because, number one, you have the Logan City Police Department trying to protect themselves, saying, oh, no, we didn't arrest her for not wearing a mask. She was trespassing. And the question is, well, why was she trespassing? Answer, she wasn't wearing a mask. So please don't try to insult our intelligence. I mean, this is for crying out loud. I'm a big law enforcement supporter. I worked for a number of years as a public information officer for a large sheriff's office. I love the blue line. I care deeply about them. But when you have an officer that probably was a rent-a-cop, I hate to use that term, for the school that night, he was a resource officer, and whether he was being paid by the school or the city, it's not your job to invoke street justice because this person is following the law and the officer is not. The school's got a policy that is breaking the law. I can't see how the police department and the school will survive a lawsuit. I think it'll be quietly settled, but I think that woman's not going to have to worry about her retirement. What's your take?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. When you really watch what took place, several things come to mind. Number one, okay, you had an officer who was a very, very big man compared to her, and yet, I granted, she was not going to get up. She's saying no and get off of me and don't touch me.
And she told the officer right up front, I am exempt from wearing a mask because I have asthma. Now, some people would say, well, how could she walk so quick? I got news for you. People that would wear a mask for any length of time, building up the O2 can trigger an asthmatic event. Period. I've seen it. I get it. It's not
only that. Listen, I mean, I too have asthma. I have it from numerous reasons. But let me just give you this real quick, okay?
All right.
The wearing of masks is going to cause more secretions, and it's going to give more cells a home and amplify any virus that's out there. And this is wearing a mask. It's actually an immune suppressive. So you're, like you said, breathing in the CO2. So it's going to limit your body's ability to produce type 1 interferon, which is supposed to help you. In other words, you're driving the infection in yourself, and you're not preventing the spread.
Absolutely.
And so instead, you're amplifying a replication, not just of SARS-CoV type, but also many other viruses, including influenza or dormant viruses. Look, and just like you said, the mask wearing hasn't been proven. The science there has actually shown the opposite. And what keeps these things dormant, these viruses that supposedly everybody has, right? Your natural killer cells. They're the most, your mast cells, basically. And that's where you're getting the inflammatory signatures, or what we call the inflammation signature, and that's what's going to get you sick. It ignites them all. So look, what it comes down to is, as we're wearing these masks, it can cause a plethora of issues to you.
Absolutely.
So people who are sick, ill, have asthma, are exempt from wearing it
by the ADA. I mean, this is a federal law. You cannot get around this. I don't care if someone says, but the school. No, the school is bound by federal law to adhere to the ADA guidelines or be sued. To even ask the woman what her condition is a $65,000 fine. Period. You're not allowed to do that. But people,
that's right.
I mean, you're forgetting. Read the ADA rules. The school and the officer and the police department that's trying to say, oh no, it was trespassing. Well, it's not going to fly, because when you get to court, the first question is, so why was she trespassing? Oh, she wasn't wearing a mask. End of the court. The case ends right there. You're done. In other words, you've just admitted that it's the mask. You can call it anything you want, but it's still the fact the school, and by the way, schools are generally run by the most incompetent people that are overpaid on the face of the earth, in my experience. When I have a school system in Florida that we know dearly because our grandkids have been there. They brag about their 97 or 98% graduation rate. Well, One of my grandkids graduated, knows nothing of history, nothing about English, can't do basic mathematics at a 4th grade level. And that's a high school graduate. So don't brag about your great graduation rates to me while asking for more money while you're spending $24,000 per year per student for this mediocre garbage that's coming out. And it's because of the lousy, crappy school systems. And this is why people are so dumb and so easily buffaloed by all the pandemic nonsense. What is your take?
Yes. Well, absolutely. It's a form of doublethink too, right? Mm-hmm. One minute we're told, don't wear masks, you don't need them, they don't help. The next minute we're told, wear masks. And here's, I thought, kind of an ingenious way of doing things. Instead of saying wear masks so that you protect yourself,
right?
What they said is, your mask protects me, my mask protects you, which means they've now opened the door so that if I just choose not to wear a mask and don't care about protecting myself, I can be ridiculed by everyone else because apparently I'm causing them harm.
That's
so
right.
They've opened the door for us to police one another.
You got it.
And it's actually kind of a brilliant way of doing it. And it's peer pressure, it's force, it's snitching, it's all of the above. And I have to say, look, yes, the fine line between pandemic and insanity, it was Sophocles, right? In 405 BC, he said, whom the gods would destroy, they first make mad. Absolutely. And we're going mad. It's what
we're going like crazy. Quickly, I want to remind people you're listening to Truth to Ponder, this Tuesday edition. I'm your host, Bob Bierman. And our website, you can always find it at truth2ponder.com. Truth2ponder.com. My guest for the hour is Reverend Dr. Timothy Gahles, and he's been a regular on the program, and I'm finding him just a wealth of information from life experience. And also, you're one of those kind of guys that spent a lot of time in school learning a lot of stuff, and it helps because you have a great wisdom, and I think that's what's lacking in our country today. We can have all this knowledge at our fingertips with our smartphones, but they don't make us any smarter because information in and of itself does not give you wisdom. It's how you apply that information logically and methodically and with reason that it becomes wisdom. We're talking about, for this first few moments here in the program, we're talking about the incident in Hocking County, which is the city of Logan, Ohio, last week. Police officer tased a very, very petite woman because she wouldn't leave a football game sitting about 20 feet from the nearest person because she wouldn't wear a mask. Now, that's not a state policy. It's not a county policy. It's not a city policy. It was a school policy. And the woman has asthma, so they can't even enforce it by state law, let alone federal law. That was very clear in the Governor DeWine's mandate. But the officer tased her anyway, and the police department is trying to cover themselves by saying, oh, she was arrested for trespassing. Well, why was she trespassing? For not wearing a mask. But that's not why we arrested her, not for not wearing a mask, but for trespassing. So it's a bunch of double talk. Do you think it's going to get any better anytime soon between now and November the 3rd?
I don't.
No.
I think what we're looking at is what we're seeing. It's almost a replication, right, of what's going on around the world. I mean, we've spoken before in past shows about different things that are happening. The Rockefeller Foundation had put out a document in 2010, and it was in that document they talked about something called lockstep. And lockstep was a way they felt that they could deal with a pandemic if it were to occur. And I believe they were talking about the swine flu back then. But they said, look, what we'll do is we have to lock down, and then we take one step of an authoritarianism from top down, and then we loosen it up a bit, and then we have to lock down again, and we add more authoritarianism.
Absolutely.
And you do this repetitiously until you get what you want, which is more of a totalitarian world government. for our safety, of course, Bob. And always remember that's
well, if you go back to the 1940s, when Germany invaded Poland, and then they put all the Jews in the ghetto, and eventually they said, we're going to take you away, hop on these cars, this is for your safety. And they took them off to places like Bergenstock and Auschwitz and other locations for their safety.
Well, not only that, what I believe Hitler also initiated was medical emergencies. He also dealt with medical things, right? Because that's where they euthanized. And they euthanized, those who are mentally challenged and physically handicapped and others. So, listen. A medical tyranny or a medical police state or whatever you want to call it is not a good thing.
No.
It doesn't ever work into freedom, ever. As a matter of fact, it is nothing but the subtraction of freedom.
Absolutely.
And compliance.
Absolutely.
So the mask wearing has no scientific background. Do a Google search on studies on mask wearing. Notice that almost all the studies you're finding right now have been written within the past 5-6 months. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, and the thing is, I was looking at this material a couple of months ago, and what I did, because I don't trust the tech tyrants that are out there telling us what our world is supposed to be in their vivid imaginations, I did something I normally do. I saved the material that I found the best that I could. Either I printed it to PDF or whatever the case may be. And all the studies prior to this pandemic, and trust me, there have been literally hundreds of very well-researched studies on the effectiveness of face coverings for viral and bacterial. And here's something else. People will be given these comparisons and say, look, if you put this mask on and cough at this dish, the Petri dish won't grow anything on it overnight. But if you don't have it, it will. Well, number one, you're talking bacteria, not virus. A virus is not going to do anything to a Petri dish to begin with, but a bacteria is a living organism, and it will. A virus all by itself is not going to multiply and grow because a virus is a non-living entity. People don't understand that. If you don't believe me, go to Google. Type in, is a virus alive? You'll find out right away a virus is not a living organism. So this stupid nonsense that, about bacteria, getting into a Petri dish. Number one, bacteria is massively bigger than a virus. A bacteria is massively heavier and bigger than a virus. Of course, it can be somewhat trapped from a mask, but a virus cannot. And then, somebody showed, did you see, I saw this, someone posted it. There was a guy that was using a vaping thing, like cigarette, what do you want to call it, pipe. Right. And he put on various types of masks that people would wear, and he quickly would just take a little bit of a puff, and then he would just gently breathe out. You could tell it was not being forced out, just normal breath pattern. And it seeped out everywhere, including the mask itself. I mean, it just came right out of the front of that paper mask. It was uninhibited with a bandana. And he's doing this down the list. You're saying, well, so what's that mean? Do you realize that a smoke particle, if you were to take something, I'm trying to come up with something size-wise. If you had a smoke particle, it'd be about the size of a basketball, okay? And the size of a virus is a pea, like a little single pea or a little BB. I mean, that's the comparison. And if a mask can't stop that, how is it going to stop, the other? I don't get it. And this is all based on junk science that is designed to keep you living in fear. I am just over.
Well, you're exactly right, but you're right. It is designed to do something. We call that propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
We call it propaganda to make people frightened. So when we sit back and we look at that and we say, okay, why do they want to make us frightened? What is the left hand doing and the right doesn't see? Or what's the right hand doing the left doesn't see? What's going on at the moment? While everybody's fighting and arguing over masks and the craziness with masks. I mean, I go out, I see people out in the middle of nowhere riding a bicycle by themselves with a mask on.
Mm-hmm.
And I look they're out in a park somewhere where there's nobody. And I say, this is insanity. Do you think the virus is just floating around on a sunny day out there?
Chasing you? Look, when you see some dear saint of God wearing a raincoat, a rain hat, I've seen this, okay, on a sunny day in Florida, a raincoat, rain hat, she's got her big glasses on, and she's got her face mask and her gloves on, driving around in a minivan at a high rate of speed, trying to get home from the Walmart before the coronaviruses, tackle her car. I mean, this is the kind of insanity we've gone into. There was that great song, I'll have to share it again.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a song I found on the internet. I wear my face mask in my car to the tune of I wear my sunglasses at night. And it really points out the virtue signaling and all the things we're going through. And I have to wonder, I thoroughly have to wonder, are they really doing that much good? I think washing hands, of course, that makes sense. That's the normal stuff you're supposed to do anyway. But I see people, my issue with the mask and the gloves, and you correct me if I'm wrong. We got a break coming up here in just a moment.
It's compliance, right? Mm-hmm. So now you're seeing all these little rules come out everywhere. You can go to a restaurant, you can order a beer, but you can't order a beer by itself. You have to have a full meal with it. Mm-hmm. Somehow these are COVID compliances, not restaurant compliances.
Right.
You are not allowed to just go and have a drink. Mm-hmm. All in of its own, a glass of wine. Nope, you've got to have a full meal with it, or else you're not allowed in. There's something to that. Well, it's called how much can I get away with, and what can I make people do? It's laughable, and yet tyrannical at the same time. And people are falling for it. My biggest concern on that video with that woman sitting in the bleachers by herself with nobody near her, really.
Just her family, just her immediate family, which is permissible.
Which she's sitting there, and everyone else just watched the cop do what he did. Nobody got up and said, look, you know what, officer, come on. This woman, what are you doing? You're too rough with her. This isn't right, okay? This is not right. Mm-hmm. I'm an American. She's an American. We have freedoms here. Nobody did anything. You know what it reminds me of? Solzhenitsyn. He said the same thing in Russia. He said they would come 2, 3 in the morning, pull people out of the apartment next door to you. You hear them. Nobody opened the door. Nobody wanted to look. Everybody pretended they didn't know nothing. Right. Listen to me. That is what they want.
That's right.
That is what they want.
And this is what worries me. I want to spend more time on the program today when we get back from the break. I got a couple of other quick questions, but I want to turn to where there is hope in all of this. My wife said the other day, and she was so right. It was over the weekend. She says, when is this going to stop? And my answer is, I don't think it's all going to ever stop. We when people talk about the new normal, it's not the virus. The virus has nothing to do with the new normal. And I don't know if you agree with that premise or not. Do you?
I do. Absolutely.
Well, the new normal, we're going to discuss it and where there's actually hope. And we're going to talk about a couple of other things. Want to remind you about the website, truth2ponder.com, truth2ponder.com. We have a break. We shall be right back.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman. This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
And welcome back to Truth to Ponder here on this Tuesday. My guest on the program is a regular now, the Reverend Dr. Timothy Gahles. And it's always a joy to talk with Dr. Gahles because we see things alike on many matters. And it's not because we're some geniuses. I think we just have common sense. And I think in this entire pandemic age, common sense is one of the things that has been lacking. We've talked about the issue that happened at that school last week in Ohio. There was another incident that made the news as well. Actually, a couple of incidents, and I want to talk about this one. There's a little town called Moscow in the state of Idaho. Now, the state of Idaho is not a big state in terms of population. It's pretty good size physically, but you got a problem. You have people that are running scared there as well. Moscow, the little community of Moscow, is in a small, tiny little county. And the county that they're in since the beginning of this pandemic has had, I believe, something in the neighborhood of 300 and maybe, 40 or 50 cases, somewhere in that line. 350 cases. Now, the town has got several thousand people, but that's all they've had in terms of cases. And since the very beginning of this, they have had nobody die from coronavirus or even with coronavirus in that county. They have had nobody, zero population has been hospitalized either with or because of the coronavirus. Yet in that county, they're all in that worriedness about wearing a mask, even outdoors. And it's becoming, and this just like the poor police officer in Logan, Ohio. These are conservative, quiet communities that are going into full tilt insanity. And a bunch of people got together for their very first song, hymn sing, or singing of the Psalms. A group of about 150 people have had enough to sing psalms and hymns in 4-part harmony, I might add. And they came and started to arrest people because they were not wearing a face covering outdoors in a county that has virtually no cases. Nobody's been infected lately at all. Nobody has been in the hospital, and nobody has died. Yet for some reason, they single this out, even though the mayor himself had presided at a wedding a while back, and none of these things ever bothered him when he had his group together. But there's something about a church that seems to be a greater target. Reverend Dr. Timothy Gahles, welcome back on this half of the program. Am I being paranoid, or is the church kind of being singled out a little bit more than other groups and organizations?
No, you're not being paranoid. It's simply what our Lord said, right? If they hated me, they're going to hate you also. Mm-hmm. What we're seeing is not just a kind of singled out.
Right.
We're seeing an absolute singled out. We're seeing a beyond reasonable evidence as to why we're being singled out, Christianity. What we see going on here, John wrote about, right? He said, you've got the spirit of the world and you've got the spirit of Christ, really. They're against each other. The spirit of Antichrist, the spirit of Jesus Christ are always fighting and always have been. Mm-hmm. He reminds us, you're of God, little children. You've overcome them because greater is he who's in you than he who's in the world. Well, the world is at enmity with us, and God tells us, do not love the world or the things in the world. For those who love the world have not the love of the Father in them. They're going to hate you. So any chance in history, kingdoms, empires, you name it, the church has always had to fight its way through.
Absolutely.
And has always been marginalized and persecuted at some point. So you're looking at these individuals standing outside singing. It was a church hymns they're singing, and you watch police come and grab one person at a time while they're singing and while everyone else is singing. It was the most horrific thing I've ever seen happen in this country. As they're doing it, I couldn't even believe that the police themselves would do that.
And here's some of the duplicity. I've been doing a little bit of research after the fact. And number one, even the deputies at the jail don't wear a mask. I mean, of all places they should, that's where they're not. I mean, they're pointing that out that, we're sitting there in jail for a couple of hours and, they're not wearing one there. I mean, it's a stupid mandate made by stupid people who think they're doing something good. They're not doctors. They're not research scientists. They're not. They don't deal in studying viruses. But you got city councils thinking that they know more. They know more than anybody, and we want to keep it protected here. I think that's a danger.
Oh, of course it is.
It's a danger.
You have to ask yourselves questions. Why are certain individuals doing this? Why are they obeying the commands? Cui bono, as the Romans said, who benefits?
Yeah.
What's going on? And we've got to understand. Here's one of the reasons we have police who are doing these things. But here's one of the reasons they want to get rid of police.
Mm-hmm.
Because many local police officers throughout this country are good people who, many of them are Christian, and many of them are not going to come and arrest a local pastor, So they might have a few people in the groups here that they can have do that, but many will not. So they have got to get rid of the police and put in their own police, whether it's the Cheka, the Stasi, whatever you want to call them. It's
or it happened. It happened in 1930s Germany as well. The local police were all absorbed into the Third Reich, and then they had to either come with the program or they were replaced by those that would. That it would take. That's just what happened. That is pure history repeating itself 90 years later. But here's something I want to throw out.
Over and over.
Let me throw this out. I've been looking at some pictures. People are flying again. I've got a friend of mine that, because of his business, he lives in Las Vegas. He also has a place in Mississippi, and he also has to travel all over the country because of his work in owning radio stations. And he'll talk about being on an airliner now that is packed to the brim like sardines in a can. And the only requirement is you get on board with no fever and wear a face mask. Now, I want you to think, where is the quickest way to get the common cold or a sore throat or strep throat or anything? It's an airliner. You're recycling the same germ-laden, and forget virus, they're tinier, air throughout that cabin for maybe a 2 or 3 hour flight, plus the time you're sitting on the ground. And so apparently it's totally safe if you're wearing a paper face mask on your face in an airliner. But try to go to church. In other words, you can get on an airliner in Los Angeles today, right now. You can buy a ticket. You could fly to Georgia. You could fly to New York. You could fly anywhere you want to go, as long as you wear your little paper face mask. Yet they want to shut churches down.
Sure. When you have a non-compliant fear, right? A fear of people who won't comply because they have a moral, ethical foundation. That is what tyrannies are afraid of. They have to suppress and get rid of them or put them in a camp or gulag or whatever. This is what happened, right? Even in ancient Rome, when Rome had different religion, it was very polytheistic like we are today, right? Oh, all the gods are equal, all those things. Well, Bacchanalia cult, which was the god of drunkenness, wine, they had liturgical rites in the Bacchanalia church, as well as other religions. So Rome didn't want too many people gathering. They don't want too many of them starting to commiserate and so forth with their moral, ethical standards and start, talking bad about Rome and a possible insurrection. So Rome made a decree that you cannot have more than 6 to 10 people at a time in these services. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, it does. It does. But we're doing it all over again.
That's right. Long time ago. It's the same old story. When you're outside, you still have to be 6 feet away. Really? Even when the breeze is blowing? So then we're told, well, you have to do 6 feet because even with a mask, if you're close to somebody for more than 15 minutes to a half hour, you can get the virus. So let's go back to your statement. People packed like sardines on planes sitting right next to each other with masks for way more than 15 minutes to a half hour. Nobody says a word.
That's right.
Listen, we have reached the insanity of a cognitive dissonance where we are losing our humanity. And I have tried to explain this to people, and I still do. When I teach, when I preach, when I'm talking with people, we are losing our humanity. We won't touch each other. We won't see each other's face, which is the expression of who we are. We won't do any of these things. We're frightened. You're not created in the image of God and love the Lord your God, heart, soul, mind, and strength, and neighbor as myself. Now you're a virus. You're a threat. I've got to call the police on you because your nose is hanging out of your mask or you're not wearing your mask. But, people are being conditioned and they're being lied to. And the hypocrisy is visible, but the cognitive dissonance does not know what to make of it. Some will say, you're right, we got to wear masks. And others will say, but the CDC said masks don't really work. And everyone's confused. And when people are confused, they're off balance. And you got them.
Absolutely.
You got them. So that's my fear, Bob. I see this and I say, we are sheep. We are sheep, and we are going to be led to slaughter because we cannot unify. We cannot unify.
You go to California, as I said, where you can fly today on an airliner. John MacArthur, gotta love him, with his church, Grace Community Church, thousands of members, and I have a friend who attends there, and so I can get the inside scoop. Former reporter, now an attorney. And I asked her, I said, okay, you're having all these services, you're having all these people. How many people have died because of your people in that church? Answer is 0. Okay? How many people have gone to the hospital because they've been to your church? Answer is 0. How many people do you know that are infected and have the coronavirus from your church? The answer, once again, is 0. But the governor and the mayor of Los Angeles are determined to shut it down. You cannot meet, you cannot worship, you cannot pray, you cannot sing. I'm thinking back to Jehoshaphat. Remember King Jehoshaphat in the scripture? And God's hand of protection came off, and they eventually had to go to battle. And after a night of praying and falling on their face before God, the wisdom came to meet their enemy singing praises unto God. And the enemy fled. And I think that's what they're scared of. Satan knows how things work. And so he fills their minds with these ideas. Stop Christians from singing and gathering and praying, and we've got them beat. Because when they're all acting together and agreeing as touching something on earth, we've read that in the scripture. So what we do, we keep them separated, we keep them apart, we keep them muzzled where they can't do anything.
Well, right. And Scripture says, don't give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, right? And it also says that God inhabits the praises of his people.
Absolutely.
So if I can keep them from praising and I can keep them from meeting together, I am going to very much so dismantle a huge effect the church can have not only on its own people, but the world, the light of the world, right? But men love darkness rather than light. That's the fight we're seeing right now. And they want to suppress the light, and they're going to do it under a medical tyranny, which is a sham, because the numbers are showing it's a sham, and they're still putting stricter laws in places, which I don't believe they have really attempted here in America yet, because Americans are very well armed, and at some point there's going to be a pushback, very, very big pushback, I'm afraid.
It is.
And it's not going to be pretty. And you are watching the absolute decimation of every private business there is. 61% will never open again.
I know.
Just think about that number for a minute. Think about that for a minute. And then understand that if we have another lockdown, the rest are in the bag.
They're done. They're toast.
And every person is going to be running to the government for a dole out. And when I said the left hand doesn't know what the right's doing, what I meant there is that while we're seeing the masks and the plague and all this stuff, the riots, They're digitizing our money.
Yeah, notice. Yeah, you're right.
All of it.
You're right. And notice when you have a riot, you can have no mask, you can scream, dance, and sing all you want, and not a police officer will pick you up or haul you to jail for not wearing a face mask and yelling and screaming and singing. But try to sing God's praises in a small town in Idaho, you're going to jail. This is the duplicity and insanity. So where do we find...
It's evil.
It is. So where do we find hope? Look, let's be honest. A lot of marginal churches that were not that faithful to begin with and whose theology was highly corrupt, they may go out of business, and I'm actually saying praise God for that, because they were an ineffective and false witness to begin with. They were all social gospel, and social gospel is not the life-changing gospel of Jesus Christ. Period. It doesn't change anybody's heart. It doesn't change anybody's condition, really, from the inside out. It can give appearances. So I don't care if the Episcopal Church in and of itself collapses. I could care less if some of the Methodists or some of the Presbyterians or even the Evangelical Lutheran Church that is so woke with their gay weddings falls apart. I could care less about any of that. But the true Christians are the ones that are going to have to be prepared to be the church in the catacombs again. And I think we're going to find a lot more strength as we find new ways to meet, to group, to associate, and to fulfill our life in God's kingdom. What is on your heart on how that's going to happen?
Right. Even meeting and associating will be difficult, as we're already beginning to see. So the catacombs, yes. I mean, look, in Russia, you had the bishop, Metropolitan Tikhon, when he was put to jail, and then he had a trumped-up trial against him, and then they let him loose for a little while, and they watched him. He went to churches, and he did the liturgy and so forth, but in the sacristy, the back room where you go change, and there are a couple assistants there with him, he was consecrating bishops, one after the other, quickly, privately, secretly. They said he probably consecrated over 1,000 bishops in 2 years before he ended up dying. And he sent them out. You see, he saw, and he was preparing the church to go out and to be in the catacombs, making sure they were going to have leadership one way or another. And these are the things. Look, God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Amen. Is it scary? Yeah, it can be. But look, there's no fear in love, right? And God, perfect love casts out fear. And we have a God who is love, the true definition of it. And we love him. And we have to remember that the Christians have never had it easy in this world. We're an anomaly here. Don't be afraid of what you see. Rejoice and understand your redemption draws nigh. But then ask yourself a second question. Lord, am I actually seeing this in my time? And if I am, you have me here for such a time as this. Yes. What is it you want me to do? What is it can I do? And, the first thing I would say is you need to prepare yourself. You need to prepare spiritually. Amen. You need to prepare physically. You need to prepare materially for the basics, as we said before. Spiritually, for sure. Let me give you an example, because God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. I was reading about some of these ministers in Russia. Actually, they were Romania. And they ran away from a monastery, believe it or not, when the communists came and took it over. I believe they made it into a horse stable after they killed everybody there. So 3 of these monks, which were ministers, ran out into the woods. And they found a cave very far away. And they went into that cave. And they actually lived there for 3 years. Now, it gets cold in Romania in the winter. They had no food. They had nothing. They had to provide. They had to look to God for their daily bread. Yes, right. So they'd forage food. Well, they wrote in a diary that in the winter, animals would come into the cave. Wolves, sometimes the bear. They would come in, and they weren't angry at them, and they didn't come in to fight them. They curled up next to them and kept them warm every night during the winter when they hibernated. Now, You tell me God isn't working. Secondly, one of them wrote in his diary, he went out in the snow to go forage when he felt it was safe for berries, anything he could find that they could eat. And he said he was walking across a field of snow, and he was leaving tracks, and he was a little worried because if the communists see the tracks out there, anybody, they're going to catch them. And he heard squawking behind him, and he looks behind him, and these giant birds are flying low to the ground right over his tracks, and their wings are blowing the snow over them and covering them. Listen, the God I worship is the same one who fed the Israelites manna in the desert.
Yes.
The one we worship can do all things. And I said to a friend the other day a statement that I heard when I was young. Tim, you will never know what you have in Jesus until Jesus is all you have.
Our guest, Dr. Timothy Gahles, here on Truth to Ponder. He'll be back later this week on the program, I'm sure. There's no doubt, as I look around me, the return of Christ is getting closer.
Years of time have come and gone since I first heard it told how Jesus would come again someday. If back then it seemed so real, then I just can't help but feel how much closer his coming is today. Signs of the times are everywhere. There's a brand new feeling in the air. Keep your eyes upon the eastern sky. Lift up your head, redemption draweth nigh. War and strife on every hand, and violence fills our land. Still, some people doubt he'll come again. But the word of God is true. He'll redeem his chosen few. So don't lose hope, for soon Christ Jesus will descend. Signs of the times are everywhere. There's a brand new feeling in the air.
is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
Once again, I want to thank my guest, Dr. Timothy Gahles, for being on the radio program today. He has so much insight, and he'll be back on hopefully maybe Friday and over the weekend as well. He has a lot of insight, and I hope you'll be hearing a lot more of him, as I really want to bring him on as the other voice of this radio program. Keep that in your prayers. We're just finishing up our first month. Hard to believe. We started on August 31st, ran all the way now through virtually most of the month of September. October is going to be here before you know it. Would you let me know you listen? This is a ministry that I developed and felt very strongly led to do. I need to hear from you. In a moment, you're going to have the website address, but please keep this ministry in mind as we try to move forward and give you some real positive truth to ponder.
This has been Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman. To find out more, visit our website, truth2ponder.com. That's truth2ponder.com. Truth to Ponder, shining the light of truth in a darkening world.